Don Andrew of the Remo 4. Well, I'm in heaven already. Welcome to our show. It's a delight to have you here. Can we go right back to the very start? And can you describe the Liverpool of your childhood? Because you grew up here, didn't you?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up in Old Swan. Lived in a prefab from when I was 5 until I was way into secondary school at the Institute, in a prefab off Prescott Road. And it was like living in a holiday camp, like living in little mini Butlins, because there was, I don't know, 50 or whatever prefabs. And the space they were in was half full of prefabs and half was a field. So that was our playground. It was surrounded by terraced houses, the backs of them. So we had a permanent playground, and we were actually on the end. We had a wire fence which we used to just climb over, and we were like in our private park. And it's there's the Grand National course that weekend. We were at the Grand National ground, a football pitch, a cricket pitch. Baseball, bikes, cycle speedway, everything happened.
That's a great description. Of all the people we've interviewed so far, nobody so far has compared the Liverpool of that period to Butlin's Soliday Camp. So it's a really nice
only
start.
one little corner which is a really precious memory. I've tried to draw it, because it's obviously gone now, but I've tried to do an aerial drawing of it. I'm never happy with it. I've never finished it. Maybe I will sometime.
You're an artist?
Well, sort of, yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
It's clear in there. I can see it now. I can see the painting, or the drawing and then paint it. Because I have done a lot of line drawings and cartoons, and then painted them in inks and watercolour.
Happy days, childhood?
Absolutely.
Big family, small family, musical family? 3
brothers. No music, apart from my dad was in the Merchant Navy, and from the war, he was at sea during the war. And he then, and afterwards, he used to entertain the troops or the crew or whoever was on the ship, doing Al Jolson impressions. He used to blackjaw, and he also had a little ukulele that came in one of the food parcels, the Red Cross parcels. Yeah. There was a little green, it's like I think it's a banjo more than the ukulele, a little wooden thing, but he could play it, and he used to sing. Sing songs to annoy us, we'd go, no, stop that, no, we'd do more and more, but we'd do, Mammy, to my mum, and she'd be trying to push him away. He had a good voice,
really?
Good singing, yeah. But that's the only. And my mum played the piano, but we didn't have a piano once we were growing up, so.
So when did you get excited by music? I assume Al Jolson wasn't doing it really for you.
Donegan.
Lonnie Donegan.
Yeah.
That name has popped up a few times. Describe, suddenly out of the blue, Lonnie appears.
Yeah. It just grabbed us. I'd swapped my grandmother had a really nice banjo mandolin, sort of like George Formby's, but double strings, and it was beautiful, but only sort of small. And I wanted to play like Lonnie Donegan, so she let me part exchange it in a little second-hand shop in Prescott Street for my first guitar. And I taught myself, the Lonnie Donegan chords.
Which song? A particular song? Do you?
Well, all of it. At one time, I could sing, and knew all the words to his full repertoire. But obviously, Rock Island Line, and then I've still got all his 78s, all in cardboard sleeves, the whole collection. But I used to sing with Colin. Colin Manley was in the same class, and he got a guitar, and we formed a little skiffle group with a couple of lads from around the corner from where I was living. But it was the Lonnie Donegan Junior skiffle group, because we only sang his songs.
What was the name of the band? Were you the Remo Quartet,
no,
or this was pre?
The Viscount Skiffle Group. And,
Right.
there's one picture of us sitting in Tommy Donnelly's backyard with the name on the tea-chest bass, I think.
Where did you play? Were you playing?
Just in his backyard.
In his backyard.
Yeah, we never played anywhere in public. But the passing milkman heard us, and he was Keith Stokes. He was in a group with Harry Prithik.
Oh.
And he said, do you want to come join our group, to me and Colin? So the Viscount Skiffle Group split in half and joined. They didn't have a name then, but we became the Remo Quartet, and we used to rehearse in Keith's attic opposite the police ground in Fairfield. Those big tall houses. We used to climb up 3 flights of stairs.
Where did the name come from?
Colin and I both liked Marino Marini Quartet, who won the Eurovision Song Contest, and we went to see him on the Empire, but they were the first group with an electric guitar. There was nobody around apart from this guy. The guitarist, piano, bass, guitar and drums, and the guitarist had a big white Gibson electric guitar, beautiful. And he used to do simple songs, but with really clear, memorable guitar riffs. And we learned a few of his songs, but we were thinking of a name like that, something like Marino Marini, and we came up with Remo. And someone said, San Remo, and we said, no, just Remo. And the Remo Quartet was settled. And we had handkerchiefs embroidered with Remo Quartet sticking
Very
out
classy.
of our pocket.
Yeah.
Dicky bows, blazers,
The lot.
Remo Quartet, hankies.
So you were serious about
by then,
what you were attempting to do, yeah.
It was just after, as we were leaving school, Colin and I were doing A-levels, and we got, there's a programme there for Pick of the Towns, a show on the Pavilion Theatre, and it was like a talent show. Every night you did the same spot, just one song, 7 or 8 acts each night, and it was Liverpool versus St Helens, and we auditioned and we were picked for the Liverpool team. And we sang Charlie Brown, but the week it was on every night for a whole week. And that was while we were doing our A-levels in the day.
Right.
We were doing A-levels and then dashing off to the pavilion. No tea, we had to be there till 5 o'clock. And do the show. And at the end of each night, the audience had to clap and vote for who'd won, you know.
How did your A-levels pan out?
Yeah, passed them all.
You passed them as well. That's pretty good going.
Yeah.
Where you talked about Lonnie Donegan, where were you seeing your idols of the day? I mean, was it TV, radio? Where were you hearing, the bands or the groups that would inspire you?
It would have been radio, and
We're talking Luxembourg or
yeah. We used to listen to Luxembourg, and we went to see Lonnie Donegan on the Empire with Mickey Ashman on double bass, and he used to spin the bass and climb on it. And we thought it was fantastic. Well, it was a great show, and it was a really, really good show, considering that would be, 1957 or 58.
Yeah.
And Marino Marini, we saw him on the Empire as well. But then it stepped up to serious rock and roll. We used to love Duane Eddy, just the guitar sound.
Yeah.
And a mate of ours, Dave Drummond, who was a bit older than us, but he sort of joined our, he used to be with us everywhere. And he was buying lots of albums, and he had Duane Eddy albums and Chet Atkins albums. That's what really got us into serious guitar music. And one of my best memories is seeing Dwayne Eddy on the Empire. And it was just like a line. The Rebels, there's 5 or 6 of them in a line. Dwayne Eddy standing slightly in front of them with this superb Gretsch guitar. And he rocked the place. The sound for us then, I mean, that was the first really good amplified, electric music concert. It was brilliant. And all the rebel yells, which I used to do whoops and yells from them. Our theme tune, our signature tune, was Peter Gunn, which Colin played obviously on the guitar. But we used to make it, we recorded it on the B-side of one of our records with all whoops and screams in it. And that stuck with us right there. That's the one the Beatles used to skip because we finished our spot for a long time with Peter Gunn.
Yeah.
It's going down, 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 down. At the end, we slowed it down by down, 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 down. Slower and slower, and we were all pointing the guitar and circling like that till the final. Yeah. And then the Beatles would be in the dressing room, and they'd run on stage after us and go, ding, 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 and take us off. We weren't that happy, but it was looking back.
In retrospect, yes.
It was funny.
So the band is now yourself, there's Harry, Colin,
and
Keith.
Yeah.
And now it's serious.
Yeah.
Can you remember the first gig maybe where suddenly, this is what we're doing now, this we mean business? And can you remember how you went down? What type of hall was it? Where were you playing?
The first year or so, it was weddings and in local halls, social clubs, auditions. If you look at, I've got a diary there from 1960.
I look forward to looking through that.
There's frequent auditions where we squeeze some expenses out of whoever was running, maybe 10 bob or something, because we travel on buses, taxi maybe. But then the regular dances started with Latham Hall in Crosby, Hollyoak Hall in Wales Street, Blair Hall in Everton area, and they were started every week. And Sam Leach, who you'll know about, he started booking. I mean, he was always had an eye to make a bit of money. He was booking halls in Kirby and Prescott, and just booking 2 or 3 bands, putting an ad in the paper, and the kids would turn up, and that was the start of it. So we were playing to dancing crowds of dancing youngsters.
Were you aware there was a music scene sort of really building and building?
Yeah, because wherever you went, we very rarely played on our. If we were playing at a wedding, obviously there'd just be us there. We were the band for the night. But if we were playing in any of these clubs, the halls, jive halls, there'd usually be 2 or 3 bands. But what sort of led us on, what set us apart a bit, was Colin's guitar playing, because he was an absolute maestro. He used to take a record. I'd come down to town to Rushworth's on a Saturday morning and buy the latest records that we wanted to learn, whatever had shot to the top of the charts, or the latest Buddy Holly or whatever. And Colin would take it away and learn the guitar part too. And the tiniest, you couldn't tell the difference. He had all the Shadows numbers, Hank Marvin's parts, absolutely spot on. We've got a few recordings of them. And if you played them, a lot of people wouldn't know it wasn't the Shadows. When we eventually got a good echo chamber to get the sound right. But we played on the Cavern. It'd be 1960 when the Shadows were on. Apache was number one, and they booked the Shadows. And for some reason, they decided Mrs. Ray McFall or Bob Wooler put us on the same night.
Right.
Because we did mainly vocals, but probably a third of our repertoire was instrumental.
Uh-huh.
So we played in the lunchtime of that day,
Yeah.
and the Shadows arrived and were in the dressing room looking onto the stage going, they're playing all our notes. And by that time, we had a full lineup of Fenders, Fender bass, red Fender Stratocaster, and a Fender Jazzmaster. And they were concerned, shall we say. Well, at night, we went on immediately before them.
Right.
I forget who was before us, might have been Dale Roberts and the Jaywalkers. Then us, then the Shadows. Of course, we were playing there all the time. We were playing week in and week out. And we'd been there in the afternoon. Our amps were all set. And even though it was packed, there was, I believe, there were 900 in that night. And the legal limit was something like 590 something. There was 900 plus. It was absolutely
no health and safety rules back then.
And the condensation was just dripping off the ceiling. I regularly came off there. I couldn't see because the sweat and that just got in your eyes, and you just had to grit your teeth and keep going. Anyway, we played and went down because we had a big following by that time. I think, I'm not certain, but I think we played Apache, but we played other stuff like the Fireballs. I'm going to lose my voice here. And then the Shadows came on after us, and they'd been in the Grapes for most of the time up to then. Jet Harris was the worst for wear.
Right.
He was apparently staggering a bit. Don't really remember, because once we'd got off, we got changed, got our kit out of the way, and then went round the back to try and watch them, But according to Hank Marvin, who did an interview with Spencer Lee here, a few years ago, I've got a tape of it. He said to Spencer Lee, whatever happened to that group who were on with us on the cab and the Remo 4? He said, they were far better than us on the night. They had, we just didn't have enough volume. They sounded like we wanted to sound, which was really nice.
High praise from Hank,
I must try not to lose that tape. But we did admire Hank. I still do. He's a proper star.
Absolutely.
And a gentleman.
What other bands on Merseyside stood out for you at that time? I mean, a lot of bands were covering the same songs, and yet each band seemed to have their own style. Or from my distance, that's how it appeared, which is quite astonishing.
Well, in the pre-Cavan days, there was, some of them you never hear about, and we saw them often, and we've got a clear memory of them, like Duke Dumond and the Rockers who used to play in the, I think it was called The Sun, a cinema just off Edge Lane in Old Swan. They were like a resident band there.
Did they become the Baron Knights?
No.
Is this something?
No, it's a similar name.
Yeah.
He was the drummer. They used to wear blue blazers, and they looked like a dance band. They had sax and other stuff. They played the same stuff like Elvis and Chuck Berry and that, but we never heard of them. They disappeared. But at that time, there was, as we were getting going, there was Claren, eventually with the Flamingos, the Rory Storm and the Hurricanes were prominent, mainly because of his suits. They all had the bright coloured suits.
Mainly because of his suits.
Yeah. And
what would Rory Storm and the Hurricanes sound like? Was that
like the Beatles, but not as good, not as solid.
Okay.
But similar sort of stuff. They used to do Gene Vincent and Elvis and Chuck Berry. Everybody did Chuck Berry apart from the Remo 4. But when they went to Butlins and came back, they had the suits made, and Rory had a full yellow suit, and Johnny guitar, I think, had a blue one. Wally, the bass player, had a pink one, like a cerise. They'd stand out from everyone.
Rainbow.
Yeah, which was good. And Rory used to do his act in between the numbers and during the numbers, combing his hair with one of those giant plastic combs, you know. The girls used to love that.
Yeah.
He was ahead of his time. He could have been a big camp star, you know, but he was quite a good singer as well.
So I'm looking at this wonderful poster advertising the Cavern, and it's from November. Any idea what year?
Yes, it's 60 or 61.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually an ad that's been in the MERSEYBEAT or something.
Okay, and it has the Beatles, the Remo Four, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, and Jerry and the Pacemakers, all on the same bill one night at the Cavern. I don't think it gives the price. Become a member now. Probably what, 2 and 6 or something to get in? Even less than that.
1 and 6 or
that must have been quite a night, and I'm guessing you had many nights like this.
Yeah, we must have appeared with the Beatles on the Cavern, you know, some dozens of times.
You were at school, were you not, with, or was it the Institute with a couple of the Beatles?
With Paul. Paul was in the same year as Colin and me. Colin and me were in the classical stream. We were doing Greek and Latin. Paul was in the modern languages stream, but in the same year. So we'd see him all the time.
And you were aware you had this outside interest of music?
Not initially. It was only at the very end of our last year when we'd started. Colin and I both had acoustic Spanish guitars, and we knew that Paul was playing and George, but there on the last day of term we were allowed to bring the guitars in and play on the last afternoon to pass the time while the teachers tidied up the year, you know. And we played Lonnie Donegan stuff in our classroom, but we heard this hubbub down in the hall, the entrance to the school, and it was because Paul and George were in the music rooms, just to the left of the gate as you go out of what's now Lipper. And George had an electric, a Hofner President electric guitar, and he was playing raunchy along with Paul and Johnny Cass, which is nothing to do with the Casanovas, but he was also, I think he had a guitar as well. But they were playing in the music room, and the crowd, the room was then full to the door and out into the corridor. And Colin and I had gone down to see, because we could hear it, and we're looking over the heads and saying, it's the electric guitar, it's got the electric guitar. And that was the first time we were sort of aware of them. And then we went off and started doing stuff around the clubs. They disappeared.
Right.
Never heard anything about them until this group from Germany was booked to be on the Cavern with us.
Okay.
And they arrived in the leather jackets and the long hair and black t-shirts and that. And as the Beatles, and we went, it's Paul, it's George, you know. We didn't know it was them. And they'd been playing hours and hours a night.
Over in Hamburg. Yeah.
And they came back and they just blew the roof off.
It had made a difference.
Oh, they were just louder, more exciting,
Yeah.
and more original than any of the Liverpool bands. Because at that time there was probably 100 or whatever. There was Jerry and the Pacemakers, King Size Taylor, Ian and the Zodiacs, the Big Three. And, all of them just paled into insignificance with the Beatles. And of course it's just a sensation every night. They were on several nights the next week or two. And Matthew Street was packed, you couldn't get near the door and then get in. That's where it all really began.
And how between the bands, was there a camaraderie?
Yeah.
Was there
yeah. There was
Mickey taking?
There was a bit of Mickey taking, but that was only because some people had the knack of doing it, like John. The others were all sort of like us, they were more introverted, you know. We want to be the best, we want to be the first to play, you know, whatever the latest hit number is. If there was a new number comes straight into the charts, you'd all want to do it. We played a lot of the same stuff as Jerry and the Pacemakers shared the nights at Blair Hall and Hollyoake with us. That was a Tuesday and a Thursday, and we'd say on a Tuesday we'd do the first spot at Hollyoake by Penny Lane, and then shoot off to Blair Hall in Walton.
Shoot off in what? The buses or the... I assume it wasn't taxis.
We must have had a van.
You had a van, okay.
Yeah, not our own van. We'd have hired a man with a van. Although, I'll have to think about that. Yeah. It's early days. We didn't actually have transport. But then on the Thursday, we'd start at Blair Hall, and Jerry would start at Hollyoake, and we'd swap over. So,
how did you get the gigs? I mean, did you have an agent, a manager, or were you pushing yourself?
I was the secretary, and it was really just being seen at these other places. Like Sam Leach would have seen us at one of these shows and booked us for his shows. He'd put on sort of ad hoc dances, and he'd book us. And Bob Wooler saw us had us at Hollyoake and Blair Hall, and when he got the job as DJ at the Cavern, he immediately started booking us for the Cavern, which would be in 1960.
Yeah, how would you describe the scene by 62?
Well, that was the professional year. That was the year that everybody, or a lot of the bands, decided this was the way they were going to get. They were going to be musicians. Because up to then, I was working in the town clerk's office here in municipal buildings. Colin was working in the Dole in Norris Green. Harry worked in an office just off Whitechapel, and Keith was still a milkman. Now, at the end of 61, people started coming. We'd had record companies, coming to find out what was going on, and we'd done auditions like everybody else. But an agent appeared looking for bands to go and play on the American bases in France. And Brian Epstein had started taking on the Beatles. And we decided to go. We wanted to sound professional, at least Colin and I did. So we applied for the France jobs, and that meant turning professional. Obviously, Harry wouldn't leave his job because I think he was engaged at the time, and so was Keith. And neither of them turned professional, so we had to reform the band. And we got Phil Rogers from the Jaywalkers on rhythm guitar, and we got Johnny Sander, who was the singer with the Searchers. It used to be Johnny Sander and the Searchers, and he was, we regarded him as the best actual vocalist technically in Liverpool. He could do country and soul stuff as well. He had a perfect Johnny Cash, Jim Reeves, Tennessee Ernie Ford, all these, the sort of deep.
So it extended your repertoire?
Yeah, absolutely, but probably too far. I think it was probably our big mistake, because half of our repertoire was Western and pop, and the other half was soul, because he also could do a perfect Benny King. If you listen to On the Horizon, which is the B-side of our first record, which is Benny King number, you can barely tell that it isn't Benny King, but that is why, with hindsight, why we never really found a place, because we were mimicking the Shadows and Buddy Holly and stuff perfectly, no originality. And Johnny was singing Benny King and Sam Cooke and stuff like that perfectly. So the American bases. And Hamburg. Did you get to Hamburg? You missed Hamburg. we went to, we did an audition in London for the basses, which I think was on Boxing Day. It was around the Christmas holiday, and I was still working then, 61.
Yeah.
We went down, we did have a van, man with a van there who drove us down. We did the audition in a little club in Soho somewhere, and drove back, and it was the worst fog they'd ever had. We had to walk miles from no M6 then. We had the M1 to Watford Gap, and then across country, and up through Staffordshire and Cheshire. Somebody had to walk in front of the van most of the way. We never got home till all hours of the morning. We left London late afternoon, and it was about 4 o'clock in the morning when we got back home, and we were all absolutely shattered, and I was in work the next day. Anyway, eventually, a week or two later, the telegram arrived, and I minded to write a book, and the opening chapter, or the opening page, would be my mum running out. As we pulled up coming back from a gig, or rehearsal, pulled up outside the gate, my mum came running out and said, "There's a telegram for you," and it said, you've got the job, and we'd like to offer you a contract on the American basis. It was from a guy in Brighton, actually, who was working on behalf of the French agent who was booking the bands. Anyway, that's what started it. We immediately agreed, must have signed the contract, and gave in our notice, as it were. But we'd had reformed the group, we were all ready. The new group with Johnny Sander was ready to take over professional. So we went to France in February. And
what were the audiences like then at the bases?
All young GIs, but they'd been sent over to Europe. America had filled bases right across France and Germany because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. They thought there was going to be a world war. So,
well, we had one in town as well, didn't we? Yeah, Buttonwood.
Buttonwood, but I don't think that change. I don't think that was active by then. But they were all National Guard. They were like territorial, so they weren't professional soldiers. They were all youngsters. And the first base we were at was in Grand, near Poitiers, and they were all from Alabama and Tennessee, they're all from the south. And we played 6 nights, I think we got 1 night off. We played 6 nights a week in the EM club, the Enlisted Men's Club. And it was full every night, because what else was there for them to do? They got paid fortnightly, so the first few nights of each fortnight they'd be in there drinking non-stop and listening to the band. But being from the south, half of them were black, and they wanted us to play Benny King and Drifters and so on. And the other half were redneck cowboys from Tennessee.
It's a fine mix.
Yeah, they wanted the rock and roll, Jerry Lee Lewis, and all sorts of unusual stuff. We learned, we got records from, I still got them, 45s off their jukebox from America that had never even been released in England. So half of our night would be playing the Western style stuff, and Johnny Sandon doing Johnny Cash used to go down the store, and Big Bad John, he used to do Big Bad John's delivery. We had to do that 2 or 3 times a night. But while they were there enjoying that, the black guys wanted soul music, and they're all, there's a lot of rumblings at the other side of the club. And then we played soul stuff, and all the cowboys would kick. It was good fun, but that was a real, like Hamburg, it was a real learning exercise for us. And we eventually did 6 bases. We did a month there, a month down on the Spanish border in the middle of the pine forest, a base there, and then back up into central France. And by September, and we decided, we were in touch with people at home. We were getting letters and postcards from mates at home, and we knew that the Beatles had been signed by Eppie. They'd released Love Me Do, and we should be there. You know?
Yeah.
So we came back, and Brian Epstein signed us.
What are your memories of Brian? I mean, how do you view him?
I view him as a real gentleman. He was great for us. In the early days, obviously, he gave us all the attention he could, and he gave a lot of promotional push when we were backing Tommy Quickly. He actually wanted us to be the backing band for Billy J. Kramer.
Right.
We toured with Billy J, I think the first tour, as Johnny Sandon and the Remo 4. But he'd already asked us, would we be the Dakotas, or be, they were called the Dakotas when he signed them, but be, it could have been Billy J. Kramer and the Remo 4 or something else. And we said, no, he can't sing like Johnny Sandon. We actually said, you're not serious, you know, Billy J. Kramer, because he hadn't made a name in Liverpool. He was Billy J. Kramer on the Coasters. He was okay, and I still, if I saw him now, I'd have a laugh with him. But he knew that we didn't want to be his band. Sliding doors moments.
Quite. So how did Tommy Quickly come into your orbit?
He'd been signed by Brian Epstein as, you know, to add to his
roster
portfolio. And he only had a very young group who were, they didn't sign the group. And he asked us, would we back Tommy Quickly? So we said yes, learned his numbers for a spot. The first tour we did our own spot. We actually backed Tommy Rowe as well. We learned his numbers, and we backed Tommy Quickly. And Tommy Quickly went down a storm. The kids loved him. And we made 4 or 5 records with him, one of which got into the NME top 30.
Tommy Quickly's songs, one of them got into the
into the charts. It was
that Humpty Dumpty or
no? I wish it had been that, because by that time we were doing what Tommy Quickly really wanted to do, which was James Brown stuff. He idolised James Brown, and he used to do James Brown style dancing on 1 foot and all that, while he was singing his own songs. We used to do some cool songs, you know, like Mickey's Monkey and Walking the Dog and things. But the record side, through, I don't know if it was through Brian or just through Tony Hatch, who was our recording manager, pushed him on to more Herman's Hermits. You know,
he had that look, didn't he? There was a certain Peter Noon look about it.
And he was given songs. We were given songs for him by the likes of Mitch Murray, who was writing for Jerry, and we did Kiss Me Now and Prove It, and the Rinky Tink songs. They were reasonable pop songs for the time, but they didn't click for Tommy. But we did a version of The Wild Side of Life, which somebody had heard. I think that was somebody in NEMS had heard it. A really unusual version of The Wild Side of Life with a complicated guitar riff at the beginning. Which was going ding 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 ding, which is nothing to do with Hank Williams or Hank Thompson or whoever did The Wild Side of Life. But we decided to do it with a 12-string guitar. Colin was playing that intro, which runs through the background. George Harrison lent us his 12-string Rickenbacker, and we used that. We did some other tracks with that as well, and that was what got in the charts. But after that, Humpty Dumpty was recorded live on the Empire on the last night of the Beatles tour. We'd done a full tour of the UK and finished up on the Empire. And the Pie brought because this is how much Brian was committing to launching Tommy quickly, they brought the full mobile recording studio and recorded his spot. So you've got the audience as well as the live ambience of the song. But he also recorded his play on and play off, which was James Brown. What's the tune? I think one of James Brown's, we used to do a play on for him. And I'll Go Crazy, James Brown, I'll Go Crazy. That's on the B-side. Now I'd love to listen to that now, only because I know that that's what Tommy wanted to do, and he never got the chance.
Right.
But he was given the Beatles number, a Lennon McCartney number.
Tip of My Tongue.
No, he recorded that.
Yeah.
That's how he started.
Yeah.
Before he was with us, that was done with session musicians, and that sort of touched the charts. It got in the bottom 50 or somewhere, and that's when Brian asked us to back it. But after Humpty Dumpty, he was given No Reply, which was on the Brother Soul album, and it hadn't been released then. And we did a session at the Pie Studios, and everybody and his mate turned up, because this was going to be Tommy Quickly's big moment. Brian was there, John and Paul were both there. Paul had Jane Asher with him. And we fled down, never done it before. We did the backing without Tommy singing, but he was so wound up, and he was drinking and smoking stuff somewhere else while we were doing the backing. The backing track was magic.
Yeah.
It was overdubbed guitars. John was playing, he had two bottles, little drinking bottles together. Paul was playing tambourine. So we got this really big backing track, and then Tommy had to come in and sing over, and he couldn't sing, he couldn't stay in key, he was straining, got to about take number 16 or whatever, and Brian said, forget it, that's enough already. Why did it end the session? We all went, and that was never released. I don't know if there's any version of it still on tape anywhere. But,
and was that it, as far as Tommy?
Yeah, I can't remember actually if we did any shows or not. We certainly didn't do any more recordings.
So you went on as the Remo 4?
Yeah, for the next few tours we were just the Remo 4, because Johnny Sandon had left. We must have asked him to leave. And we backed Silla on one tour.
You asked him to leave. Is there a story there, or that can be told, or?
No, I can't remember the detail. We must have been encouraged, to just stay as a foursome, because Brian wanted us for our music, but he didn't want Johnny Sandon. Right. And we backed Silla, we backed Gene Pitney, and Tommy Quickly.
1963 hit here in Liverpool, as elsewhere, and everything changed, I imagine, as far as the Liverpool Mersey scene went, because London descended on Liverpool, and then left.
We were largely out of Liverpool, and we were
with Brian, of course.
We did 2 big tours a year, and lots of weeks in the summer. We'd do a week at Blackpool, a week at Great Yarmouth, a week in Bournemouth, a week in Aberdeen, in between the long tours.
Yeah.
One of the standout moments was finishing on a Sunday night in Great Yarmouth. We were on with Lulu, I think, and the Hollies, other people. Finished early, 9 o'clock Sunday night. Monday night, we were opening the show for a week in Aberdeen, which is like 1,000 miles, and there was no Humber Bridge there.
Yes.
So this shows you, at least we were held in high regard. We had a chauffeur-driven car to take us from Great Yarmouth to London, to our usual B&B hotel we stayed in when we were in London. So we got into London like midnight. Car to pick us up in the morning to get a plane to Glasgow. We flew to Glasgow and then got a chauffeur-driven car from Glasgow to Aberdeen, which technically got us there before 5 o'clock. But all our gear was in our van, and Jim, the foremost road manager, they weren't on that particular, they were all in the armour, but he agreed to take our kit to Aberdeen. So we set off on Sunday night and had to drive like all the way around the Humber through the Goole or wherever, and drive to Aberdeen. And we got to Aberdeen, got out of the car, like, here we are, where's our gear, where's our suits? And this was about just before 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
I think we were on at 25 past 5. 10 to 5, we're at the theatre. No gear, no suits.
No.
And then chug, chug, chug. The van comes round the corner. Jim, covered in oil, he'd been underneath it, whatever had happened. He got there just in time. We had to, all hands on deck, threw the amps on stage.
Sound check.
Dragged the suit, got changed, virtually running on the stage. Got onto the stage, must have tuned up obviously, and the compere, whoever he was, said, welcome to the show, and here they are, the Remo 4, and we're there like that, as if we've been there all day, you know, if only people knew what had gone in that previous 24 hours. Yeah.
You were telling me before the cameras rolled about a story about a taxi.
Oh yeah, well...
Was that Arthur?
Arthur Howes
Yeah.
was the promoter of all Brian's tours, and he gave a dinner, you know, a meal and a party night for each of the shows. I can't remember which show it was, but I suspect it was Billy J. Kramer and Silla, one of that tour around that time. And we all went back to London after the whatever night the show was, and he booked a big Chinese restaurant in Edgware Road, and we had a great meal and lots of wine and stuff. And we weren't used to wine. I mean, I was only 21 anyway, from reading through the letters, Linda and I wrote letters to each other for every venue. We've still got them all, with the envelopes, with Don Andrew, Kerry, the Beatles show, the Odeon, Hammersmith or wherever it was, and all mine from the hotel we stayed that night. And we've not read them all, but flicked through some of them. And one of them says, after the party with Arthur Howes, we got a taxi and shared it with some of the escorts, a couple of the Remo, and Mike and Greg after the escorts. And they were younger than us, they were probably only 18, 19. And we were going through Piccadilly Circus, and Mike opened the door and fell out in the middle of the road. So he's rolling across the road in the middle of London. And I wouldn't have remembered it if I hadn't written the letter.
So it's sort of diaries of
it is,
those
yeah, so
heady days.
I'm looking forward to the day, it should be now, when I read through all the others and get all the actual stories.
Fantastic. So you were on the Beatle tours. The Beatles are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger by every day, really.
We were locked in the theatre with them.
Yeah, what kind of scene was that? I mean, just a few years earlier, I mean, you were playing weddings and what have you, know.
Absolutely.
Suddenly you're the toast.
Yeah, well...
How did your band go down? Because I know when I first saw the Beatles, there were a few other bands on the bill, and through most of those other band sets, the chant was going on, we want the Beatles, we want the Beatles, until Jerry came on.
Yeah.
We wanted him,
yeah.
But the others had a hard time.
I have to say, we never experienced that. But it was the noise. We'd travel, I'd say there were 6 or 7 bands on the bill. The Beatles would travel in the car with Neil. And Mal Evans would drive their gear in their own van. and everybody else was on the bus, on a coach, with all the gear, in with the luggage, you know, all the amps and everything. So we'd arrive, everybody but the Beatles, get into the theatre. There'd be kids outside, but nothing you couldn't deal with. We got in all right, but this would probably be late morning, early afternoon. By the time it's getting towards the first show, which would be 5:30 or 6 o'clock, you couldn't get near the theatre. There was a sea of girls outside screaming, "We want the Beatles," or whatever. So once we got in, and we all did our own sound checks, we were stuck in there. We couldn't get out then until the show was over and everyone had gone home. They arrived, they'd be hustled in from the car, the way you've seen, you know, it's been documented. But inside, once we're inside, it's all one big happy family. You know, we'd be in each other's dressing rooms. I remember George coming into our dressing room in Glasgow when they were doing one of the albums. I think it might have been Rubber Soul, or one of their early albums. And he came in to see Colin because he knew and respected Colin as a guitar player. And he said, "What do you reckon to this for a solo?" I forget which song it was now. But he came in and played a guitar solo he was planning to put on one of the records. And him and Colin were discussing it and do this and do that. That's good and that. But that, you know, backstage, it was fine. It was like a big family, a big
Liverpool
club.
family.
It was,
Yeah.
yeah. We were more or less all from Liverpool. I say we occasionally had the Hollies or Freddie or somebody.
Honorary Scousers.
Yeah, we never really gave them that. Although you regularly see stuff about Merseybeat groups like the Hollies. From the Toggery in Stockport.
Were you on the final Beatles show in Liverpool? Were you with them then in '65?
Yeah.
Yeah, again at the Empire, that final show.
Yeah. That was the one where we went back to the Cabaret Club afterwards for a party, end of tour party, and Sounds Incorporated were on. And after he'd been in the casino and lost all his money, Tony Newman, the drummer from Sounds, stood up on the table. We'd finished our meal, we'd had a proper dinner. He stood up on the table, took his pants off, took his socks off, and this is all our wives and girlfriends were there as well, around the big table. He took his socks off, set fire to one of them, and singed himself.
Just another night on the roads with the band.
I doubt if he'll deny it if you ever get over it.
Music seems to be thriving again across Liverpool today. Are you aware of the scene here? Do you keep in touch?
To an extent, yeah, because my son Paul is a sort of solo songwriter, singer, and he's produced a CD recently of his own songs. And also my grandson, the third generation, he's put music out with a group called, on his own, and with a group called the Veraces or Varices. So I'm aware of the type of music, but I can't say I'm in touch with who is doing what now. We've been out of Liverpool for 21 years now.
And
we haven't been back very often.
1965, is that when you decided to
I left the group because we got married.
Yeah.
And Paul and the group, the other three, wanted to be in London.
Right.
They wanted to, on nights off. We usually had them Monday nights off on the tours. They wanted to go back to London and be on the scene there. I wanted to go back to Liverpool and the baby. So we gradually fell out over a few weeks, and I left in '65. The last night I played was in Hull, and had to find my way home after a Sunday night gig in Hull. So I went outside and asked the taxi driver, fancy going to Liverpool? And he took me, it was 30 quid or 40 quid.
Yeah. A bargain
Yeah.
at that time, a bargain.
Yeah.
The band went on in various
they
states.
brought in Tony Astor.
Yeah.
And
were you aware of him before?
No.
Okay,
no.
so he was...
I was afterwards,
Yeah.
and he played at the memorial concert for Colin in 1999, 15 years ago, and he's died not long after that. But as the Remo 4 in Germany, they did have quite a lot of success.
Yeah.
Had chart success, and eventually became Ashton Gardner and Dyke, or Roy left to form Ashton Gardner and Dyke with Kim Gardner and Tony Ashton, and had a #1 with what do you call it?
Resurrection Shuffle,
which
yeah.
I love, and
Yeah,
that is Roy.
fantastic.
That is Roy Dyke at his best, the drumming on that.
And Colin?
Colin joined the Swinging Blue Jeans.
Right.
Well, before that, he worked with Clodagh Rogers for some time as her MD and toured with her and played in the pit orchestra at the Palladium.
Right.
He also toured with I've forgotten his name, an American big name American singer. I should remember. But Freddie Starr as well. He was Freddie Starr's MD and toured with him, which was a difficult time for him. But actually, going right back to the beginning, when we were starting at Hollyoake Hall and Blair Hall, and Bob Woollert was producing the shows, DJing the shows, and he encouraged us to get people up on stage because he knew of people saying, "Can I get up and sing?" And Freddie Starr was one of them. Freddie Starr used to go to Hollyoake every week, and he got up with us.
Yeah.
And there's little cuttings from the Echo that I've got. The Remo Quartet, it might have been that. Remo Quartet with Freddie the Teddy. And he'd do a 4-number spot.
Yeah.
But 4 of his impressions, which he was still doing now, he'd do his Elvis, he'd do his Billy Fury, he'd do his Adam Faith, Cliff Richard maybe. So we'd do 4 songs with him, and he went down great, and he was a showman.
Yeah.
And then another couple called the Royal Brothers, Frank and Sid, I don't know their full names, but they used to do the Evs. So we'd do a 4-number spot of Everly Brothers numbers with them, and they were really good, Everly Brothers.
Today, do you keep up?
No. The last time I played seriously, or tried to play seriously, was Colin's memorial show.
Right.
So it's 15 years since I played to an audience. Had a good night on my 50th birthday, which is a bit previous to that. At the Beatles story here, we got the original 4 together. So we've got Harry, Keith, Colin and me. And two of my kids, Paul and Helen, were doing backing vocals. The Beatles story was packed with lots of friends. Like Jerry was there, he got me with a few numbers. Kenny Johnson, who we just lost, was there, he got up and sang.
Mike Byrne,
obviously, he was now one. He's my main link with the Liverpool scene now. I went to see his band over in York, his current band.
The Sun Rockers.
The Sun Rockers, they were excellent.
Absolutely,
Excellent. I love that.
Yeah.
That set they did.
Yeah.
With the slack bass. And,
Yeah.
Mike thinks he's Jerry Lee Lewis.
He is Jerry Lee
He's on the end of the keyboard.
No, he's Mike. That's who he is, and he's fantastic. Yeah.
Jerry Mike Lewis. No, he's better than ever at singing, and he's front in the band better than ever.
Don, absolute delight. I could sit here till the cows came home,
Well,
should
we
they
probably-
ever decide to come
If
home.
you had that time, we could probably carry on.
I think there's a series
Voice is
here.
gone.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have a rummage through some of the material you brought with you, which for me is sheer gold, treasure, and we'll get some of that on screen
If you can
for the viewers. So
shoot
fantastic.
it,
But
yeah.
thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Delight to meet
It's been
you.
a pleasure. You're
Ah.
cold, haven't
I don't know what to say about
you?
that.
Warm heart. It must be the warm.
We can only hope. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.